Hey guys, Alphamon here for another deck profile, and as you can see from the thumbnail, we are actually looking at Alphamon. I did a deck profile on this deck a very long time ago, back when Oryukin first came out around like BT9, and the deck was actually it was one of like the literal top decks. For those that joined the game later on, like after that, after BT9, like around BT10 or whatever, basically this deck got hit super bad and it lost its main crucial like level 5 that basically allowed it to protect itself from a lot of effects that would kill it basically. The only way to kill it back then was to either overpower it or to bounce it back to hand, because it had no protection from bouncing to hand. Plus, it basically lost to the actual top deck during that format, which was Metal Guru X, which, as you know, is a favorite of this channel. That deck was basically the main counter to this deck, aside from maybe War Greymon X, but that was still very rare. But aside from that, like this deck has kind of been chilling in like the tier 2 1.5 like section of basically the meta basically, and it's been just kind of hanging in there, just using the other X antibody stuff from the other evolution lines basically, and kind of just being that rogue tier 2 deck that can potentially get wins occasionally. But now with the new support from BT13, this deck is actually making a huge resurgence. Like in my locals, I know for a fact that there were at least like 3 other people that had rebuilt Alphamon because they used to play it back in BT9. And yeah, so this deck is one of like, aside from like Greymon and Metal Guru, I would honestly say Alpha is like one of the fan favorites because of how good it was, and the fact that the franchise does kind of like X Antibody, especially now with Seekers coming out and all that stuff. There's gonna be a focus on X Antibody, and the fact that one of the main characters will run a Dorumon, so this deck will be getting probably more support later on because of that. But aside from that, let's actually go into the deck profile so I can show you what I mean. So for the eggs, we're still running the 4 Doraemons. Doraemon is still probably the best egg for Alpha. You can run a Kyokomon and some of the other X antibody ones, but I feel this one's the best because it gets you that extra draw whenever you place a card underneath as a source, which is like the whole gimmick of this deck basically, so you're guaranteed to have this go off, while the other one just gives you that extra 1000, which a lot of the other new cards can already do anyway, so there's not really a point to it. So I feel this one's the best egg. And yeah, for level for level threes, rookies basically, we run exactly 12. First, we run, of course, the original Doru that came on BT7, the one that lets you search for X antibody, one X antibody from 3 cards. And of course, its inherent is the most important because when you tuck it underneath, you immediately get that +1 memory, which is a really weird and kind of strange ruling, honestly, in my case, because it wasn't really underneath the guy, but it's whatever. That's how the judges rule it. Then we run 4 Ryudamons because Ryudamon is also a searcher, just like Doru, looking at the top 3, except instead of searching an X antibody or a Kota, this searches an X antibody and a Yuji. And it's inherent, honestly, I don't really feel it's really used half the time, but you usually use this for a search, basically. Then we run 2 of the Dorumons from BT9 because on play you can trash a card with X Antibody and get to draw 2, which is really solid. Then we run 2 of the new Dorumon from BT13 where it gives +1000 as an inherent all turns, which is really cool because now that usually before you would leave your alpha and then occasionally a War Greymon X would just kind of power through it, but here it's not really as big of an issue because if you leave or you can, he's usually like a 20,000 guy on their turn. So regardless, they can't really DP reduce him enough to kill him or punch through sometimes. So really cool. And yeah, that's basically all the rookies we run. As I mentioned, we run the standard 12. You can run more, but I did see some builds running 2 Sunrizamons. But I feel that it's better to just focus on the X antibodies and stuff that you can actually search because that way you don't miss any of your searches with your tamers and other stuff. For level 4s or champions slash adults, we are running 4 of the original Darugamon because opponent's turn, while this guy has an X antibody in his traits, or X antibody, gains blocker. It also does the all turns +1000, so you gotta run at least 4 of this. Then we run 2 of the new Dorugamon from BT13. This doesn't really have any other effect aside from its inherent, which gives that plus 1,000, so really solid. Then we run 4 of the Dex Dorugamon because, of course, 3 evolution on this on top of it, and you get to trash a card and gain a memory, and it gains blocker and retaliation, so really cool because you can set it up so that if your opponent tries to swing over your guy, you basically kill them in the process. Yeah, that's basically all the level 4s for the deck. For level 5s, we run 4 of the new Doro Gray from BT13. This guy is basically the best replacement we will have for Alphamon because the previous one was already pretty busted beyond belief because the fact that it can't be deleted and it can't be DP reduced made it really strong. This one, when digivolving, you get to just reveal the top 3 and then equip one, and by doing that, it's protected from DP reduction, but you do trash the other cards, which does end up setting up with the alphas. And its inherent is actually way more busted than the previous one because the previous one would just give you an extra security. But here you get to equip a Digimon with X antibody underneath it at the end of the turn, which is really cool because you can potentially tuck a Doru and just not pass it to your turn over to them basically, and you can evolve into Alpha immediately, which is really cool. Then we run 1 of the original Doru Gray because when digivolving, you just get to place something and it is prevented from being deleted or DP reduced. So we still run the 1 copy, which it sucks that we can only run 1 copy, but that's just how it is because it's too powerful, honestly, and basically made the deck really good. Then for the last level 5, we run 2 of the Dex Doru because Dex Doru on top gains you a memory and it pops their level 4 blocker or a rookie that might be preventing you from gaining memory. And then when did you evolve? Yeah, and yeah, that's basically it. That's what it's here for. That's all for the level 5s. For level 6s, we of course run the 3 Orumons because Orumon, basically, you don't really use it for these effects like ever half the time. I mean, you get to equip something and it can't be deleted and it gains plus 2,000, but you're mainly going to be using it for its inherent, which is end of attack. If this guy is Alphamon, you get to unsuspend it. You basically run 3 to tuck it underneath using effects to basically unsuspend and just keep swinging. Then we run 3 of the new BT13 Alpha. This new Alpha is actually really busted because on play or when digivolving, you can just place a Digimon underneath it, and then it basically makes anything 10 cost or higher not be able to attack. And then it has another effect that can basically let it protect itself alongside its other protection. So if it were to be removed like by chaos degrade or like anything that is like bouncing or whatever, you can just detach something from underneath him and prevent the removal, which is really strong because that was probably the only thing stopping Alphamon back in the day was hitting a chaos degrade, which you could only counter with Congo, and then hitting a Kakaitis breath, which was like the worst. But yeah, now that we have the protection, this deck becomes way stronger. Then for the last level 6, we run 1 of the Alphamon because we get to basically de-digivolve something and equip something immediately, which is really cool. And yeah, it's really cool that we get to equip something from the trash. That's also another key thing. Then we run, then that's all for level 6s. For level 7s, we only run 2 Oryukens. My Oryukens are still coming in the mail, so I've proxied them at the moment. Oryuken's busted. It gets to delete all of the highest cost. End of turn, it gets to detach to gain back memory by basically preventing you from decking out. And then the fact that it gets to swing twice because of Oryuken or multiple Oryukens, so really powerful. But yeah, that's basically all the all the Digimon in the deck. The rest are just options and tamers, but mostly just tamers. So for the options, we run the 2 X antibodies because this is an X antibody deck, so you want to just swing sometimes, and then also for alpha, you can potentially protect them with this instead of detaching a guy, so really cool. And of course, in security, if they hit it, you gain 1 memory. So really solid. Then we, of course, run the mentioned Congo that I mentioned before about Alpha. Congo is just there to prevent, especially in the meta at the moment, Shine Gray is one of the top decks, and this basically prevents them from healing their Marcuses, which is very crucial because if you let them heal their Marcus multiple times, they basically get to just keep replaying it and healing their security up non-stop. So it's better to run at least 2 of these to stop them from doing that. And then for Tamers, we run the 2 Kotas because it's our memory setter and it does search when it gets hit. Then we run the 3 UGs because we're equipping a lot during battle, and we gain the extra memory and draw when we push up a guy from raising. Then we run 3 Cool Boys because Cool Boy is still one of the most broken X antibody tamers because it not only gains you a memory and a draw, but it also lets you. Well, yeah, basically when you suspend it, you get that memory and draw specifically, which is really powerful, especially if you have multiple of them already on the field. By just evolving like this on top of Dora Gray, you basically get to gain like an extra memory basically in that process, which will help you set up Alpha for the next turn, which is really busted. And yeah, that's basically the deck. Alpha honestly hasn't really changed much. The only changes honestly are just the inclusions of like the new support, like 2 2 and like 4 this and then the new Alpha. But aside from that, everything else is basically the exact same as it used to be. It's just basically build Alpha, swing really hard, and if they can't counter it, they basically lose. Um, Honestly, like it part of me really is like I like that the deck is coming back because I did play this deck. I did try this deck out, but at the same time, I really hate it for how busted it is because it's just so disgusting to see your opponent gain that much memory in one turn. Um, but aside from that, like as I mentioned, this deck can be easily countered. Shine Gray is probably its worst, one of its main matchups that it has to go up against. Um, Against Royal Knight, I feel this deck can outspeed it much faster because Royal Knight takes way too long to set up. Against Metal Garuru, honestly, I feel it's its worst matchup because Metal Garuru basically does the exact same thing this deck does, but much faster, and the searches are a little bit more simplistic without having to use tamers. Like Metal Garuru does not need the tamers half the time to even set up; it can just go off. While this one, as I mentioned, it has to set up a little bit longer sometimes because you have to go into like decks and other stuff. Um, then with War Greymon now, before this deck could easily just kind of prevent the deletions by War Greymon, but now with the fact that War Greymon can boost itself up beyond 20,000, which this deck can barely breach into sometimes, um, I feel like War Greymon is also another really tough matchup. Honestly, basically, it's like the main two biggest like matchups that are horrible for this deck would be War Greymon and Metal Garuru because they both can either swing too fast or boost high enough to get over your stuff or just bounce your stuff to get rid of it because it's both of them have ways to counter this deck incredibly, which is probably why those two decks were probably the ones that were countering this back in the day. Aside from that, like maybe Belfamon might be an issue if they can stop your attacks, or if you hit like certain removal cards. Um, there's also what else is there in the meta? There's also technically Blue Flare because Blue Flare will become more predominant. As I mentioned in my previous deck profile of Blue Flare, this deck, Blue Flare is actually pretty strong, especially against Royal Knights, against Mirage Galga, against basically a lot of the meta decks because it can stop a lot of their things, basically, especially here in Alpha. If they run anything that can stun you, you're basically kind of screwed. And if you hit a Sorai and your sources get stripped all the way, you basically can't really do anything next turn, which really sucks. Um, and yeah, no, it's just this deck is really good, but it's still basically operating under the old rules almost. With the new support is very simplistic. It doesn't really do as much as you might think. You're still relying on the old abilities basically to win the game. Which is kind of not great because both of its worst matchups will be getting better support and potentially might hurt them in the future because of that. So yeah, aside from that, look out for that, and you should. I feel like you should succeed with this deck regardless. And then, as I mentioned before, this is just a template that you can use to basically build your version, and then modify your way up to making the version you want to do. Aside from that, thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time.